All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Tim and Tim Show, making moves in multifamily live. This week, we're talking about something that a lot of people talk about, and I don't know if people are really doing a great job leveraging. I can honestly tell you that Tim and I use these things all the time. I can think of two different occasions we've used master lease options or MLOs in the last 60 days, 90 days, but also how many transactions we've done with seller financing where either the seller is the bank or the seller is carrying a portion of the down payment back for us. So just wanted to kind of dive into this information and talk about how we've used it and how you can apply it into your own real estate business. What do you think, Tim? Is that it?
I love it. I like creative ways.
Problem solving.
Problem solving. And then, Tim, we talk about it all the time, man. Like when we first started this, we knew like one way to do a deal, right?
That's right.
Then as we got going, we learned another way and another way and another way. And
yeah,
people ask us about our scale all the time. It's like, this is a big part of it.
Yeah, having a big toolbox with a lot of different tools in it to make it so that you can make a deal work. Now, I made a post recently about a property that I sold. Morning, Dennis, you're back. Oh, we were worried about you there off the coast of Cuba, and he made it back alive, thankfully. No, just kidding on that. But just for you, those that don't know, Dennis didn't join our show last week. So I texted him and I asked him if everything was okay because he didn't say morning, fellas. So he was on vacation. But so I had made a post recently about the property that I sold, Dogwood Lane Apartments. And on that closing statement, which I provided full documentation of the deals that I sold and how I bought it and showing the numbers and some of the things are rounded numbers just for illustration purposes and whatnot. It's not to the penny. But what a lot of people had questioned, they were like, how did you get a seller finance position on this deal? And was the bank okay with it? And ultimately the answer is yes, the bank was okay with it because it was on the closing statement. The seller originally was asking like $1.3 million. And the rent roll was like $9,000 a month. I mean, the property was worth maybe $700,000. So how did I get to that point? How did I get to the point where the seller came from a $1.3 million offer price or asking price, and my valuation of the property on in-place financials being like $700,000? How did I make this deal work? And ultimately, what I did was I used some of the tactics from Never Split the Difference. I anchored them low. And I anchored in them. I said, hey, look, this is what your property's worth based on the operations of it today. So if you just want to take your money and walk away from this transaction and be done with it, I can give you what it's worth, which is about $600,000 or $700,000, whatever that number was. And that's because that's all the bank is going to lend me on it. That's all it's worth. I'm sorry if you feel that way, but like, this is what this property is worth. But I said, if you're not willing to sell it for that cheap, or if you're willing to work with me, I can put a couple different options in front of you that might help you out, get you a little bit more proceeds, maybe make you a little bit of money in interest. Are you open to something like that? And the seller was like, yeah, there's no way I'm selling it for this price. I want to double that. I was like, okay, well, so I anchored him low with my cash price. I anchored him high with 100% seller financing offer. So I was like, well, if you seller finance at 100%, this is the rate, this is the terms, this is everything, because I got to bring the money for CapEx. I got to do this, I got to do that. And ultimately, I knew it wasn't going to work for him because he had it listed with a brokerage, and he wasn't going to pay this brokerage, maybe $70,000 or whatever he paid them to sell the property. He wasn't going to come out of pocket to sell a property. Like that, just as a real estate owner, that doesn't really make sense. I would never do that. I would never come out of my pocket to sell a property. I would just own it longer until it's sold, right? So option A was cash price of $600,000. Option B was 100% seller financing, which didn't work for him because he didn't have any money in the bank at that point. And option C, which is really the option I wanted him to take, was a combination of the two, where I made him a fair offer, which I was like, this gets you substantially more money than what you can sell it for today based on how you've operated it. But it also enables me to bring money to the table to be able to to meet the return levels that I'm looking for on my side of the table, and you get some money. So you get some money at closing, which is great. You cover all your closing costs. You got an extra slug of equity that's collecting interest from day one, so there's no dead time on your money. And yeah, you got to wait a little while to get it, but it's guaranteed money. You're realizing those equity
Right.
gains today, and you'll get paid out for them later. And he was like, you know
Right.
what? I really like all those options. Thank you for providing different things for me to pick from. I'm going to go with this option. And ultimately ended up, it was originally like 925,000. And then after due diligence, I traded him down and he came down to 910,000. And kept the $250,000 at 3.5% interest. And, little did he know that he did know a lot about it, but, I was able to go out and get a construction loan, and the bank financed 100% of my CapEx. So I had to bring a percentage of the money down, because they wanted me to have some money in the game. And it turned out to be whatever that closing statement was, like just under $60,000. But what wasn't captured in there, it was also I had to pay the insurance up front. So that was money that I had to pay out of pocket, like, after closing. It wasn't on the closing statement. So it was a little bit more than $60,000. It was like 68,000, maybe $70,000 out of pocket to close on that deal. But I just wanted to show you that these things are out there. Those types of deals are out there. And you have to think about, how am I going to solve the other person's problem in order for this deal to work for them, but also work for me?
Yeah.
And it's not a one-way street. It's totally a two-way street. You just have to know what hill are you willing to die on, and which hill are you not willing to die on. And you have to have some give and take there, because what is that saying, Tim? I think we were talking about it recently. We were going through some stuff. And it was like, a successful negotiation, nobody's happy. Right? Nobody's happy because, the seller got some of the things that he wanted, and gave concessions on things that he didn't want to, and vice versa. Like, it's a give and take thing for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And Tim, I wanted to go back to one thing you said early on, because I've had a number of these conversations lately with potential buyers. We have some stuff that, we're potentially trying to sell, have some partners that are trying to sell some stuff with us. One of the things you said early on was the guy wanted what, like 1 million, 1.1,
1.3.
Yeah, his property was worth, what'd you say, six, seven,
6 or 700. Yeah.
But you didn't walk away from that. You got creative to figure something out. And guys, the reason I'm bringing this up is because, we run into a lot of guys, a lot of buyers who come to us and they're like, how'd you scale? How'd you scale like you did? And it's like, well, we look at things a little differently than some other guys. Like, we had one conversation recently where the guy's like, man, I buy on spread. I buy on in-place spread, right? And if his spread isn't where he wants it, that's it. He's done, right? He's done. And I'm like, well, work with me. Let's come up with something, right? Let's come up with something that'll work for you. Your spread may not look like you want it to going into the deal, but maybe we can get your spread even higher, right? As we get going.
Oh, now you piqued my interest.
Yeah, but Tim, like you said something there, like what did that in-place cap rate look like? I mean,
it was like a 7 cap. Oh, I mean, at 700 something thousand, it was like that's what its value was, at like a 7% cap rate. But
you paid 900.
Paid 900, 910. Yeah.
Yeah. So guys, like,
his NOI was maybe somewhere between $45,000 and $50,000 a year.
So guys, do that cap rate calculation. Like, most people would have walked away from that deal based on cap rate alone, right?
Yeah, so let's just say $50,000 divided by 910. It's a 5.4% cap rate. And a lot of people are like, oh, dude, I don't buy anything less than a 7 cap. Well, look how much money you lost out on because you weren't willing to solve a problem.
Oh, yeah. And by the way, Tim just sold that deal, what, about
2 weeks
15
ago?
days? Yeah, 2 weeks ago. I mean, this has not been a seller's market by any means. And I mean, that he did. I mean, what was it? What did we calculate, Tim? Like, you ended up with like a 6x, something like that.
From my original investment, it was, what did I put into it? I don't know. I walked away with what, 475,000, and I put in, like, call it 70. It was like, almost 7x on just equity, not including the cash flow that I got over the 2 years and reinvested into. I mean, there's a lot.
Wait, you overpaid for a deal and you had cash flow during the deal?
Yes. Yes.
Guys,
Yeah.
I'm being sarcastic.
Yeah.
I'm just telling you, like he got creative. Tim got creative going into that thing, and um, and look where it got him.
Yeah, I mean, when I bought it, the NOI was, like, around $50,000 a year, and when I
Yeah,
sold it, it was about $135,000 a year. It's more than doubled its value, which was great, but I
yeah,
overpaid for it. Um, I paid $900,000 for a property making $50,000 a year, but, so hypothetically, if I got it to 100,000, $100,000 NOI, I should have been able to sell it for $1.8 million. Well,
yeah.
I got it better than that NOI wise, but I couldn't sell it. I couldn't, sell it for as much. But,
Right.
you know, point being is you can go in on a low cap rate and turn around and make a property make money as long as you have a clear business plan where, the rents are severely below market rate, or, you have a long enough time threshold where you're like, hey, you know what, in 5 years, I know that the rates are going to be, or the income numbers are going to be significantly higher. Me personally, though, after that rehab period was done, I was bored. I was like, all right, we gotta move it. We gotta sell it. We gotta do something else because I can't just sit here and watch it sitting there. Yeah, watching it make money is great and all, but
Yeah,
man, just the aggressiveness in me is like, all right, we got to move this money. It's been
yeah.
sitting there too long.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, Tim, because a lot of people talk about like real estate should be boring, and I don't disagree with you. I mean, in a lot of cases it should be, but it depends on where you are in your kind of your journey. I don't want to get too poetic here, but
Yeah,
yeah, it kind of depends on where you are, right? Like, Tim's not ready to be bored; he's ready to move it.
yeah, I'm ready to work hard and grow my equity balance, and
Yeah,
maybe in like 10 years, I'll just sit there and just put it into something and not have to think about it anymore.
yeah. 10 years sounds like a good time to be bored.
Yeah. Yeah, I got the time and energy now, and I have the resources with our management company and access to deal flow and debt and everything. It's like it would be foolish of me not to continue to grow that money.
Yeah,
Because I think was it Mike Ely says it very no Nate Berger's one that preaches this all the time is you don't get rich on cash flow. You get rich on equity. And if you
right.
increase your equity balance, your cash flow will naturally go up. If cash flow follows equity. So
Yeah.
increase your equitable balance and your rate of return will naturally make your cash flow go higher.
Yeah, and actually Nicole Gauthier had a really good post on some of that today, talking about how you build a foundation, right? And that's kind of what you're talking about, and that's what Nate talks about is you build a foundation with your initial properties, right? And you
Mhm.
create cash flow and equity to buy another one, and to buy another one, and buy another one, and buy another one, and you use the cash flow and equity to kind of build and scale, right? Because at some point, yeah, you're like, hey, I've reached the net worth I'm looking for. I'm ready to just kind of enjoy this cash flow, right?
Mhm.
I'm ready to sit on the beach, take some trips, maybe do 2 deals a year instead of 10, right?
Yeah, right.
Um, and that's kind of what we're talking about here, guys. Is like, how do you do that, and how do you build that? And Tim's talking about some alternative ways to look at creating that scale, if you will.
Mhm.
Because again, this is a deal. I bet you're not the only guy that looked at that deal at the time.
I It had been on the market for a while, and
Yeah,
it had come to me because, I mean, the broker literally told me, he was like, "He's asking too much money for it." I was like, "Cool, I'll still underwrite it and make an
yeah,
offer." And,
yeah,
I used Tim Brotz's 3 offer LOI template. I made him 3 offers, and here we are, right?
yeah,
So it works, right? It's opportunity gets tired of persistence. So if you
yeah,
keep being persistent, you will find opportunities that other people are not willing to make an offer on because they don't want to solve the problem because it's not easy. But it's not the low hanging fruit. I mean, it took a lot of back and forth. There was
right,
probably LOI negotiations for 3 weeks.
yeah.
But nobody else was looking at it because it was a small deal in a small market that was overpriced. I was like, cool, this is an opportunity for me, depending on why and how bad this guy has to sell it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a really good point. Because what I always think the joke's kind of funny, right? Well, LoopNet and Crexy is where deals go to die or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, hey, it would take a lot of mining, but if you're willing to get creative like this, that's where deals go to die. Well, how do you solve somebody's problem, right? Go
Yeah.
go find one of those deals out there that's been sitting there a while and call that guy up and be like,
Hmm.
let's get creative. And
Yeah. I
let me
mean,
solve your problem.
Yeah, let me solve your problem. I mean, like one deal, right? Sure, it's a lot of mining and it's a lot of effort to get there, but one deal, I mean, $60,000 in cash flow after paying all expenses and reserves and everything.
Yeah,
That's a lot of money for somebody to quit their job and be like, hey, this is at least a foundation for me to pay my car payment, some groceries, and my rent every month or your mortgage every month. I mean,
right.
that is a solid foundation for somebody to give them the confidence to go out, quit their W-2 job, and really spend more time focusing on building their real estate
Yeah.
business.
Yeah, and Tim, speaking of that kind of thing, Tim and I have a couple of things now that we are kind of like, hey, let's just let them eat a little bit.
Hmm.
We got
Yeah.
a couple of things where it's like, hey, we can make this per month on it, so let's sit for a little bit.
Yep.
Let's let it pay us.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great segue into some master lease options. I don't
Yep,
really know if a lot of people do MLOs. I mean, if anybody watching this does MLOs or has been a part of one, we have now done 2 in the last 90 days.
yep,
So very comfortable with how they work and kind of the economics of why people do it. Hey, what's up, Joe? Good to see you. The master lease option, that was a really interesting one for us because we had bought a number of properties last year that we got at a really good basis, but they were kind of difficult for us to manage because of their location. And ultimately, we were like, "Hey, let's just sell these. We'll capture some equity. We got them at a great basis. We don't really need to do much. Like, let's just turn around, sell this with plenty of meat on the bone for the next guy, and let somebody else make money on this. Like we'll just we're just going to consolidate our operations and stay like within a certain region and that'll help us. But we also started thinking about the tax impact of
yep,
potentially realizing short-term gains instead of long-term gains. So that's when the master lease option came into play because we could give somebody an option for a year or two, not take any money now, but take some cash flow now and push those short-term tax gains into long-term capital gains. So I mean, we talked about that last week. We talked about capital gains last week,
yep,
going from 37.5% interest rate, capital gains rate to potentially a 0, 15, or 20% long-term cash. I mean, you're literally cutting your tax bill in
yeah,
half
yeah,
by doing that, right? So it was beneficial for us to do a master lease option. There was no dead time. The closing costs were minimal. The people that took over the properties got the deal at a great basis with great leverage because we essentially moved into a note position with the master lease option, essentially, right? Um, and they're going to own the deals. They're going to operate them. They're going to deploy a little bit of capex, and in 2 years, or less, they're going to refinance it, and they're going to own these properties free and clear themselves with no other investors because they didn't really have to come out of pocket with too much money. Too much money.
right.
Now you can structure an MLO however you want, right?
Yeah,
You can get absolutely creative there, and we definitely have gotten creative, but it was beneficial to every party involved.
yeah, and then one of the and you hit on something there about too much money, right? Like a little bit of money. One of the beautiful things about an MLO is that you can structure it such that the closing cost for the new buyer or the new owner is essentially not zero, but very minimal, right?
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, I
and I
mean,
think
what was
that's
like less than 5 grand?
yeah, right. Like a $1 million plus property, and you got like less than 5 grand in closing costs. And I think I talk to people about this all the time. One of the biggest hurdles to overcome when you're doing like a JV and especially a syndication is closing costs, right?
Yeah.
And guys, remember when you pay closing costs, that's lost equity at the time you closed it, right?
Mhm,
You came to the table with 30, 40, 50, sometimes 60, $70,000 in closing costs
mhm,
based on the deal that raised your basis on the deal, right? Well, you got to make that equity up, right?
mhm.
So,
Yep.
think about that. If you 70 units, if your closing costs are $70,000, you just raised your basis by 1,000 a unit, and you got to go make that unit $1,000 plus more valuable,
Yeah.
um, right there. And if you go close on a 30, 40 unit property, pay 5 grand, 6 grand in closing costs, well, you've saved yourself quite a bit of headache trying to increase that equity, right?
It makes what it ultimately does, it opens up options for you on an
Yeah,
exit where you can sell the property for a lower price, essentially leaving more meat on the bone for the next guy,
right.
which it this is a bad word or bad way to phrase it, but it more so guarantees your exit. And what I mean by that is like if you have a lower cost basis, you have the freedom to be able to reduce your sale price to get out of the deal if you have to at all costs, right? Like things go belly up and you got to dump this property just because of other things going on in your life, or this deal is just not working out for well for you. You can sell it for whatever your basis is, and somebody else might be willing to come in and buy it for that. Sure, you're not
Yeah.
going to make a ton of money, maybe any money at all, but the speed in a real estate transaction can sometimes save your bacon, just being able to get out of a deal quickly.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree. And Joe, really good point, by the way. And that's very true in a lot of cases. I mean, not even talking about getting creative. Tim and I sold some stuff in the last 2 years, and you would be shocked at the number of offers that we get where it's clear nobody's put in the work.
Yeah.
Even at the offer level, just to underwrite it correctly or even underwrite it at all in some cases. They're literally just throwing offers out. And to your point, people got to put in, you got to put in a little bit of work up front.
Yeah. I mean, how many properties do we have for sale at one point, like kind of going into the end of last year and the beginning of 2025? Like what, 6 properties for sale at one point?
Yeah.
And it was very apparent the people that would take your in-place rent roll, multiply it by 50%, times it by 12 to get your annual NOI, and apply like a 7% cap rate and say, boom, this is all I'm going to pay you for it.
Right.
And
Right.
I'm not saying that doesn't work. If that shotgun approach is how you built your business model, fine. But let me tell you, if you spend a little bit of time and effort and show some investment into the deal, people are much more willing to pay attention to you and at least have a conversation with you to figure out if we can make something work rather than just, I mean, how many offers did I get on that place that were just immediate no's? No, I'm not even going to consider it because your qualification through your LOI just wasn't there. Right. So
Right.
you look inexperienced. You clearly don't have any interest in this deal, or you're just trying to scalp for a good deal.
Yeah. And no offense, guys. I mean, you guys know that Tim and I run Making Moves. We have a coaching program as well.
Mhm.
But I will tell you, Tim and I will promise you that an experienced broker can tell when you're showing that you've been in a mastermind and you're throwing out an offer based off something you learned in the mastermind,
Oh,
right?
yeah, that's funny. That's yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. They
Yeah.
they know. They're not stupid.
No, in fact, one of our favorite brokers, I won't mention his name, but one of our favorite brokers has come to me before and he's been like, here's an offer, but I promise you they've been in, and he even named the mastermind. He was like,
Yep.
this mastermind, and he's just throwing an offer at you based on that. And
Yeah, right.
and guys, that's not dogging on masterminds. We run one ourselves, but it's supposed to be a foundational thing. It's not supposed to be a go out and just stick to this all
Yeah.
day long, right?
Yeah.
So
I can say, because I run our Tuesday underwriting calls
mhm,
for Making Moves. We don't do that. Like we
no,
actually look at the deal. We look at each expense line by line, item by item, and have an understanding of, is this overpriced? Do we know that we can operate at less than what somebody is currently operating at? And what is a fair offer based on how we think the operational expenses will be when we take the property over
yeah,
versus just saying, I'm just going to apply a 50% expense ratio and make an offer. Like
yeah,
that
and
doesn't work.
yeah, and guys, I'm going to toot our own horn here for a second. I didn't mean for this to turn into a Making Moves pitch, but one of the things I do like about those Tuesday calls that Tim runs is it's not just a does it work in this scenario? No, like I've sat on those and watched him walk through with the guys. He's like, let's see if how it works as a JV. Let's see how it works in a syndication. Let's see how it works if we go after tax abatement. Let's see, like there's things on the table that they're exploring on, like, how do we make the deal work? Does it work with seller financing? Does it work with a construction loan? Like all of those options are on the table when they're exploring a deal.
Yeah, that's really good call out because not certain deals though, no amount of seller financing or
No,
creative structuring will make a deal work, right? I mean,
no,
and we come across a lot of those. And ultimately, you try to pull every lever you can before you get to reducing the purchase price, but sometimes there's no working around it. Like it's
yeah.
just it's the only way that this deal is going to work is if you reduce the
My
price.
my favorite, Tim and I joke about this one every once in a while. This was a guy like 3 years ago, 2 years ago. I don't remember. He had negotiated seller financing, and we're looking at the deal, and I'm like, it doesn't work. And he's like, but there's seller financing. I'm like, yeah, but you're going to
Doesn't
run
matter.
it for you're going to run it for 5 years. And then when you sell it, you're still going to have to pay the guy out of your pocket. And he was
Right.
like, but seller financing. And I'm like,
No. Right.
no.
Right. There's no amount of seller financing that can replace your cost basis.
Right.
Your all in cost basis, including your capex and everything,
Yeah.
closing costs and all that.
Ultimately, that guy quit the mastermind, by the way.
Yeah.
He didn't like the answer.
Well, I'm not here to stroke your ego. I'm here to tell you the truth, or at least what I think the truth is.
Hey, listen, man, if we save that guy from paying somebody 5 years later and another $150,000 out of his pocket, it's okay.
He got his money's worth.
Yeah, he got his money's worth.
Well, yeah. So master lease options, I don't think they're as common as some people may make them out to be, or at least they're just not talked about enough.
Yeah.
It is a really useful tool. And I think the most use that we got out of the MLO was it enabled us to change our tax impact from doing a sale more quickly than what we had anticipated. It was obviously very enticing to the buyers because of the leverage and the reduced closing costs. And, there's a lot of benefits there. And I just, I look at this book, it's on my shelf somewhere. Oh, Creative Cash. Who wrote that book? Oh, it's up there. Sorry. Bill Ham's book, Creative Cash, the red one. There's a lot of great structures in there. If you haven't read any books about creative financing, seller financing, master lease options, whatever, he's an absolute master at it. I highly recommend you read those books. Now more than ever, with interest rates continuing to rise, and everyone thought 2025 was going to bring relief to the commercial real estate industry, I think we're in for another year worth of heartache. Creative financing and structures now is the way for the next year. Unless you're just getting somebody that has to sell it, your basis is really good, they're going to sell it at a loss. You might be able to save them from selling it at a loss if they're willing to come to some kind of agreement with you that that they'll take their equity and push it down the line a couple of years. So use it in your favor. Use it as leverage right now, because I can tell you a lot of people are not leveraging seller financing creative structures enough. And I think the biggest point of that is because if you come out of the gate with a seller financing structure, it screams, I don't have money to buy this place. And saying that out loud now, I actually think that one of the reasons why he was willing to come to the table on my deal and have a conversation about seller financing was because I anchored him low with an actual cash price based on his property financials. And he was like, well, if that's all somebody is willing to pay me for it, what can you offer me? And that's when you hit them with well, here's some more other options that you could potentially use to get this deal done.
Yeah. And man, one of the things too that we didn't hit on, but one of the things I love about seller financing is it's another opportunity to negotiate, right? Like, I mean, we can go to the bank right now and, you can get bridge loans at 9, 10, 11%, stabilized as, high 5s, 6s, 7s, but you can come in there and, I mean, quite frankly, you can beat the bank in some cases, right? You can come in and be like, hey, this is basically a bridge. I'll give it to you at 8%. And so now I've saved you a little money on interest and I've cut your closing cost, right?
Yeah.
And
Todd, the name of that book is Creative Cash by Bill Ham.
Yeah.
I mean, in the real estate game, debt is everything. Leverage is everything. So, give on price, take on terms, is a common saying. I mean, how do you think I got seller financing at 3.5%? Over 5 years. I mean,
right.
Should I have kept that deal? Maybe, because the debt was so good. But at the same time, I got cash in hand and gives me the opportunity to go out and buy new stuff and leverage it up and continue to grow. So, decisions have been made and we're moving forward and just looking for more seller financing, creative options. There's a lot of opportunity today with those types of things because I think, people aren't looking for the low hanging fruit, just throwing out offers, not being genuine in their, problem solving ability, any advice from me is, go out there and try to make a deal work instead of just saying, doesn't work, overpriced.
Yeah. Yeah. If it's in your market and you think you can do something with it and the market, take a deeper look at it.
That's critical. That's critical that, you understand the market. You understand what properties are paying on a price per door basis, what you can do with a property. I mean, that is more critical than anything, knowing exactly what you can sell a property for. And that actually, now that you mention it, John Evans is a friend of mine that lives in the area that this property was for sale. When I originally was underwriting it and looking at it, he actually knew of the property, and I asked him what, where I needed to be on an all-in basis and what I could sell it for. And man, he was bang on the money, right? And I'm so glad that I
Mhm.
have friends like that I've built relationships with, that I can make a phone call and they just know, what deals are trading for, where you need to be safe, to make money, and this, that, and the other thing. So, going out, growing your network, and really becoming an expert in your market is super, super important.
Yeah, really important. And guys, like that, like Tim said, grow that network. I mean, Tim and I there's a guy who, I mean, he buys 5 times what we buy, but occasionally I'll get a call from him and it's like, hey, I'm looking in this market. What do you think about this? Um, and I would never think that someone like that would call us up, but because we know the Carolinas like we do, we get those calls. So
That's right. So
go out and find those people.
that's right. And Joe, you're right, man. Great deals are not found; they are made. That's absolutely true. So, all right,
So
guys. With that, I appreciate everyone joining today, and we will see you next week. Peace.
see you guys.